So when it comes to cutting these and putting them into place, there's a lot of dynamics here. You've got to have your measurements correct, your depth correct. We actually are doing a corner range, so we have an odd angle and it doesn't quite have, it doesn't go directly into the corner, it sticks out a little bit there. So there's a little bit of geometry that we have to do here. Hopefully in this video, as I kind of walk you through the steps, you'll understand where I'm coming from. If you don't, feel free to message me, I can help you out with this. But the main gist of this is that we want to be able to get these measurements right, because we spent several hours just sanding this thing down to get it to the state that it's in, and messing these cuts up could cost you an entire day's worth of work. Pay close attention, watch how we kind of do our geometry on an odd corner, and hopefully this video is helpful to you and you can build one of these cabinets at home for yourself, with these countertops. Cabinets, countertops, get them all confused at this point in time.
Okay, so right here we're making a template that we can use to kind of test our countertops before we just go and cut them. Basically, if this were our original wall and it comes back and turns 90 degrees, and then we built a faux wall perfectly angled in the center of it, we would basically create a triangle of a 90 degree turn and two 45 degree angles. So we're recreating that to get this angle for the range. The trick is that this wall sticks out right there. So we had to get the measurement of where the range is going to sit on this back wall and measure that distance in. On a perfect 45 degrees, that would be 1.5 inches this way, 1.5 inches this way, because when we measure this line going in and we do it at a 45, we're basically just moving that line out until we have an even measurement on either side. That doesn't look completely even, so I'm going to double check this before I do anything else. But knowing that this is 1.5 inches means that the corner of this triangle is actually 1.5 inches out here. Thank you, Ben. This is my cheat sheet. The triangle needs to come out 26 inches to the end of the countertop. And therefore we know that this piece has to come out 26 inches, but not to this line or here, but 1.5 inches to the outside. Our corner is out here because that's where this corner would come down. So our 26 inches this way, we measure out this way, and we add on 1.5 inches coming out that way. That gives us two of our sides. The third side is then basically drawing a straight line with our level out in between these 2 points. So I'm going to cut this kind of triangle piece here and make sure that this is going to fit perfectly with our range concept, because we don't want to cut our countertops until we have this. Okay, so by using our method of measuring, using the geometry of 45 degree angles and 90 degree angles, I have created this template, and I tried it and it works. So we know that our way of measuring is precise, and we're ready to do it on our final countertop piece. Now, when I did this piece here, I did it based on 26 inches on the depth of the counter. We actually want our counters to be 25.5 inches. And I know that because our cabinets are 24 inches deep, and we want the overhang to be approximately 1.5 inches. So I've measured out here 25.5 inches. I've made a mark. Now my saw blade is 1.5 inches, so I'll go in another 1.5 inches to 24 inches. I'm going to make a mark there. Measure 100 times if you have to, but you don't want to get this wrong. The reason why I measured a 24.5 inch line, even though I'm trying to do a 25.5 inch cut, is because by the time I line my saw up with that 24 inch line, I'm going to be cutting just at that 1/2 inch off here, because this the difference between the guide and the blade is 1.5 inches. And the guide is going to be fixed so that it runs along this board, which is going to help us get our straight line all the way down and cut this. You need to make sure that you are using a straight board, because any bow in this board is going to cause a bow in the countertop. And so we need to clamp this down so we can rip this down. Now, something you'll notice here is that I always use scrap pieces. I never throw away my scrap pieces because I'm always using them again. But I always use scrap pieces on either side of the boards because this board I'm using is a guide board. I really don't want to wreck. It's a nice trim piece, and I don't want to put any dents in the actual countertop itself. But I need to be able to hold this down pretty tight so that I can run my skill saw right along here and get a nice clean edge on this. So we're going to go ahead and follow that. And I'm right at 25.5 inches. That was perfect, all the way down. We got a perfect cut, straight cut all the way down with a skill saw. Now all of this would be a heck of a lot easier if we had a table saw that we could just run things through, but we don't. And so instead of complaining about it, we're just setting up some brackets and anchoring some things down, and we're getting our cuts. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this to be a nice, perfect, even 90-degree cut. This is going to be a little more difficult. I'm going to need to use a framing square to figure out exactly where 90 degrees are from the edges and run these two together, because as you can see, the lengths of these boards are all very different from one another. Anyway, so my framing square has grown wings and flown away. So I can't quite figure out how to get just to make sure that I'm getting a complete straight 90-degree angle. So what I've done is I've fixed this 1x8 here, and I'm going to come over on the other side and just kind of double check it over there and square it up the best I can and get as close to a 90-degree angle as I absolutely possibly can. We don't want this thing to be off a little bit. On this side, I'm going to take another block of wood and hold the edge as straight as I possibly can up to that one, and just try and make sure that I'm getting as straight a line as I possibly can here. Very good 90-degree angles everywhere before I tighten this thing down. It's going to be the closest perfect angle I get to a 90-degree. It looks pretty flawless to me. We'll cut it and we'll see how this turns out. Now, this is a case where some painter's tape would help with some splintering along the way, but for the most part, this section is going to be completely throwaway when we're done with this, so wasn't too concerned about it, but it looks to me like we're going to have a perfect angle here to work with as soon as we remove all this. What we figured out earlier was that in order to get the right amount of space along the wall to where the range is sitting, we need about 1 3/4 of an inch. And because this is a 90-degree, so we're going to have a 90-degree angle, a 45, and another 90-degree angle coming out. So to get our 45-degree angle, we're just going to measure out on both sides here that 1 3/4 inch. What's going to happen is we're eventually going to cut this off right directly on this line here that we just created. And that's going to give us our perfect 45-degree mark. Now, in order to get the line that's coming out from this corner out to there, we need to measure, we have to include one of our sides. So we've got 25.5 inches is the width. Theory, 25.5 inches would be right here. However, if this were the angle, the actual angle would take us out another 1 3/4 inches. So I'm going to stretch this out 1 3/4 inches, remeasure that 25.5. This is where my 25.5 is. So we can create a square holding this at our 1 3/4, because that's what we're taking off down here. That's 45. We're creating a new 90-degree angle that's a little further out, and each of these should be, as if we had a square here, 25.5 inches. Now, if I hold this up here, this should form a perfect 90 degrees right in here. It looks pretty perfect. So this next line that we're going to end up cutting to fit into our counter is from our new corner out to our other new corner. So in order to fit this in and have our range coming out perfectly, those are the cuts that we need to make. Now you could cut this free-handed without using anything, but the likelihood of screwing this up at this point is pretty big. My final cut here is just the length of the countertop. Went ahead and remeasured everything and had it lined up so I could just go ahead and cut this. Now we should go see if it fits.